Time for an intro. We have business to attend to. The high-profile trial was unfolding right before your eyes, and it would change American justice forever. You know what's so interesting? You were either watching this or you were watching the O.J. Simpson trial, both revealing equally as jarring information to the public. A crime that stunned the nation. Jose Menendez, what a guy. He had everything and nothing at the same time. The big house in Beverly Hills, the nice car, the luxurious job, money, power, and a seemingly perfect family. Jose Menendez, husband to Kitty Menendez and father to Lyle and Erik. If you didn't know the family, you would think that they were living the all-American dream. But on the night of August 20th of 1989, everything would change. Jose and Kitty were winding down watching TV with a bowl of popcorn when their own two sons entered the room with one goal and one goal only: to make sure that when they walked out of the room, their parents would be no longer alive. Lyle and Erik Menendez fired 13 killing their mom and dad. An hour and a half later, they would call to report the crime. Lyle was the one speaking into the phone, hysterical, crying out, "Somebody killed my parents, somebody killed my mom and dad." Jose Menendez was born into a socially prominent family. He understood that to be a Menendez was a privilege. He spent his entire life proving so, chasing a life of excellence, which he was more than successful at. He attended Southern Illinois University, where he would meet his future wife, Kitty. Both great students, determined people, conventionally attractive people with their own set of talents. Kitty was a pageant queen. Jose was your ideal athlete. In 1963, they tied the knot and they moved to New York to start a family. 5 years later, they gave birth to their first child, Lyle, and 3 years later, Erik was born. Kitty was happy staying at home, taking care of the boys, while Jose would devote his entire life using every ounce of energy that he had to make as much money as possible. At the time, he was a CFO of a company which and where he was either very respected or strongly hated. He was a very intelligent man, there's no denying that, but he was the kind of guy that would step over as many people as he had to climb to the top. Jose was aggressive, he was demanding, he was selfish. He moved his family to New Jersey. The house was a mansion and it had a tennis court in the backyard. Lyle and Erik were raised to be tennis players, forced into playing by their father and with a lot of pressure to be the best of the best. Jose Menendez had Lyle and Erik's future painted to perfection, and when they started to show that they were not the type of people that were going to grow up to be like their father, it left Jose with nothing but disappointment. Both kids were a disappointment in different ways, and he would make sure to let them know that. Jose kept climbing up the ladder, became a self-made millionaire, and he moved his family again to Beverly Hills into another mansion. As young adults, Lyle and Erik began breaking into homes. They would steal cash and valuable items, but when they would get in trouble, Jose would swoop in and come to the rescue. I mean, imagine being raised in that way. There's no doubt, if that's all you've ever known, that your mind would be trained to think that you could do anything, get away with anything. And if things ever did turn against you, there was nothing that daddy's money couldn't fix. The older Lyle and Erik got, the more reality would set in for Jose that his boys would be nothing like he was hoping they would be. And that realization made Jose decide to cut the boys out of his will. If they were not willing and wanting to work hard for anything, they simply were just not going to get any of his $14 million estate, and he told them so. Only weeks after cutting them out of his will, that 911 call would come in that Jose and Kitty Menendez were no longer alive. After that 911 call, the police show up to the house. Lyle is hysterical. Erik is lying in the fetal position in the middle of the street, also hysterical. The scene of the crime, brutal. Blood everywhere. Body parts scattered. It left officers thinking that that was the work of professional criminals. And that is where they would turn their heads at first to find their killer. But sooner than later, suspicion would grow, pointing nowhere other than to the victim's sons, Lyle and Erik Menendez. The investigation at the beginning was showing that Lyle and Erik had an alibi, that they were overwhelmed with grief, and that it was really likely that their father, Jose, was involved with dangerous people who were seeking some kind of revenge. But as soon as Jose and Kitty were buried, the investigation took a turn. Now, all of a sudden, it was showing that Lyle and Erik were on the spending spree of a lifetime. They were spending money on jewelry, on clothing, on shoes, cars, real estate. If they wanted it, they got it. Lyle was doing fine. He was okay. Erik was drowning in guilt. Erik confided in his psychologist. He told him the truth. Eventually, Lyle too would also confide in him, and he would tell him that he committed the perfect murder. So perfect that he even said his father would be proud of him. Their psychologist taped the confessions, and those confessions would eventually land in the hands of law enforcement. And in March of 1990, the boys were arrested for first-degree murder. The woman that Leslie Abramson is. Leslie is an American attorney. She's known for her high-profile criminal cases. She was going to be the one representing the boys in court. The boys pled guilty, claiming the murder of their parents was in self-defense. Lyle and Erik would have separate juries, but the cases would be tried together. Leslie was determined to prove that the motive behind the crime was a result of lifelong abuse that the boys had suffered at the hands of their father, emotional, psychological, physical, and even SA. The other side had to work their hardest to prove that the murders were strategic, they were calculated, calculated. They were on purpose, with the motive being greed. They needed to prove that the boys did it for financial gain. Every single move in that courtroom from both parties was tense. It was heavy. The air in there was thick, and the entire nation was watching. The prosecution showed the jury violent pictures of the crime scene with intention to leave an impact on the jury. An example of one of those photos was a photo of Kitty's lifeless face, completely wrecked, with one eyeball still intact and the other eyeball gone. The defense, Leslie, called up Lyle and Erik to the stand. They gave their powerful statement to leave the jury shocked. The boys delivered emotional statements, devastating statements, revealing the deep and psychological scars they had left from their traumatic childhood. They described a home filled with anger and fear, and they went into deep details about the SA that their father put them through. Both sides as well were extremely tactical in the way that they presented their case. For example, Leslie had the boys dress in colorful sweaters to give the idea of more innocent young kids, to make it easier for the jury to picture young boys who were scared and lived in fear. She was very, very motherly to them in court, patting them on their back, letting them know that everything would be okay. Whereas the prosecution would focus on presenting graphic evidence and detailed testimonies of the crime scene to remind the jury of the brutal nature of the crime. Erik's jury deliberated for 16 days and they came back deadlocked. Lyle's jury deliberated for 12 days and they also came back deadlocked. The juries could not come to a decision, and that resulted in a mistrial, meaning the brothers had to be tried again. It was during this time that O.J. Simpson was charged for the murder of his wife. O.J. Simpson knew Jose Menendez. He had been over at the Menendez house for dinner. He had met Lyle and Erik. The next time that O.J. would see Lyle and Erik would be in the LA County Jail, where all three of them were facing murder charges. July 2nd of 1996, after almost 7 years of their parents' death, Lyle and Erik Menendez were found guilty of first-degree murder. The brothers were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. They were sent to 2 different prisons, and since then the brothers have not had any contact with each other. Erik Menendez since has said that he made a terrible mistake. When he was asked what the mistake was, he said that he should have unalived himself and not his parents, which that made me cry a little bit. That is my take on the Menendez case. I don't know, I probably did not add any information that you guys don't already know. This case has been all over social media for years, but I did want to cover it solely for the reason that I want to know what you guys think in the comments. So let me know, let's talk about it. Anyway, thank you guys for spending time with me today. I just realized that I was like yelling the entire time throughout this video. I literally get so excited to talk to you guys, like I'm sweaty because I was so pumped up. Anyway, hope you're having the best day. If not, you better go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy. I love you guys so, so much. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.